Grand Rising to all the advanced souls out there, Galactic Jedis, Freedom Fighters. Welcome once again to another in-depth, no surface level stuff, mind-expanding presentation. Now, I did promise you guys that I was going to do a thorough description of what the Time Wars were all about. This is another face of this interdimensional spiritual warfare that has been fought beyond weapons, beyond physical interactions, which is a different part of the face. Okay, so you have to understand that these time wars have been going on since the beginning of time itself. Okay, as soon as advanced civilizations or intelligence reach the level of understanding interdimensional physics, understanding the manipulation of the space-time continuum through by accessing the quantum hyperdimensional fields of reality, which of course led to later in our black budget operations became known as the Philadelphia Experiment, Montauk Project, Project Pegasus. For those that doubt that the cabal had access to time travel, well, it's all interconnected. Okay, this is all overall, guys. This is a multidimensional warfare where everything that is happening right now is a reflection of what's been going on every dimension. All right, it just so happens that now we are at the conversion point. So I'm also going to be talking about the Time Lords and introducing a whole new different element regarding the higher intelligences that operate from the realms of eternity, also known as the central universe, that ultimately have the say-so when it comes to which timeline becomes permanent and what ultimately plays out. So we're going to go deep today, guys. I'm going to be introducing who the Time Lords are as a branch or a version or aspect rather of Prime Creator Source, operating at the highest levels of reality within the realms of eternity and within the super universe governments of the super universe segments. So before I get started with today's presentation, guys, I do want to mention that the folium is up for grab. All three are in stock. I always put the link, or I pin it in the comments after the presentation. It's first come, first serve. Again, this is the stuff, the holistic way of eliminating the nanotechnology, the graphene oxide, the radiation, and all of those metals that should never be in our bodies, okay? Not to mention, it allows the healing process to take place. Another thing I wanted to mention as a reminder, I am going to be speaking at the Rise of the Guardians conference this coming May. And I believe my talk is on Saturday at 4:25 p.m. Pacific time. If you are going to that conference, I would greatly appreciate it if you sign up through the link provided in the comments when I pin it at the end of the live or in the description. And finally, but not least, for those that did not get a chance to book a course with me, I have new classes that have been brought that are up for grab as of today, actually, on the, I believe it's April 12th and April 13th. So they begin April 11th and April 12th, Saturday and a Sunday. So I can't wait to meet some of the new people. And of course, I can't wait to continue seeing some of my students that are just advancing on every level of class that I offer. And how exciting is that? Okay, so with that having been said, I'm going to get right into it. Okay, so again, throughout this interdimensional warfare, which is known by various names, right? Spiritual warfare, including non-physical realities and physical realities. There is a different face of the wars that is being fought on a different front, rather than planets blowing up planets with, beam weaponry, starships shooting laser beams at other starships. Yeah, even though that did take place in the history of our galaxy, today, guys, I'm going to be connecting the entire time war in a sense where it was first initiated between the Galactic Federation and the Draconian Empire millions of years ago. And then, of course, a different face of it was carried out, believe it or not, by our own breakaway groups and, of course, secret space programs. Okay, so we're going to go deep today. So As many of you guys know, humanity is standing at the threshold once again, okay? And a lot of this has to do with a revelation that is so profound that it actually reshapes our understanding of what history and reality itself is. Well, for centuries, time has been perceived as a linear progression, right? From past, present, and future, unfolding in a single direction. Well, according to the new physics through the quantum avenues, consciousness studies, and of course, covert technological developments have suggest a far more complex than what we've been taught. Well, in this untold version of reality, there are multiple timelines that are existing simultaneously. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiarized with that concept, right? Each representing a different version of Earth and a different destiny for humanity. Well, within these overlapping realities, there is a silent, of course, conflict that has been unfolding that is described as the timeline temporal wars. So, across the spectrum of existence, there does exist an Earth where humanity has already evolved into a highly advanced spiritual civilization, mastering energy, consciousness, and of course, interstellar travel. And so these timelines apparently do operate beyond the limitations of scarcity, control, and they are functioning in harmony with universal laws. Well, at the same time, as revealed in my previous presentations, there are fractured timelines where chaos, conflict, and manipulation dominate, where humanity remains disconnected from its true potential. Well, these realities are not isolated. They are actually interconnected. They are bleeding into one another through energetic resonance and more significantly, through technological intervention. Hidden from public awareness, various functions within classified programs, or what they call black budget operations, have long explored the manipulation of time and space, leading to the breakaway groups of the SSP, secret space programs. And so within these programs, technologies have developed that allowed access to alternative timelines. Do you guys think we just built anti-gravity aircraft, access zero-point energy? No, we also inherited and perfected technologies that were capable of accessing alternative timelines and, of course, manipulating the temporal construct of the time-space continuum, right? This is what they call temporal navigation and the ability to influence key events across history. Well, this is another face of the war, of this interdimensional warfare between light and dark. These operations represent a frontier where physics, advanced physics, consciousness, and even advanced engineering begin to converge. So, within this hidden domain, two primary forces have emerged. On one side, we have a network known as the shadow government, right? Which are the descendants of the human reptilian bloodlines, a collection of powerful interests that have sought to maintain control over humanity by influencing timelines in their favor. Well, through a temporal interference, predictive modeling, and of course, strategic manipulation of events, thanks to the Greys and the Dracos, this group did aim to anchor in humanity into a controlled reality, one that was, of course, destined for centralized power, limited awareness, and technological dependency. Now, on the other side, we have the Earth Alliance. Now, this alliance is not just military personnel. It is a convergence of groups, spiritual people, military, individuals that are at the forefront of science, that are already beginning to grapple with interdimensional physics. And of course, advanced systems that are committed to restoring balance and preserving a positive trajectory for humanity, while utilizing both emerging technologies and a deeper understanding of consciousness itself. The Earth Alliance has also engaged in efforts to counteract the temporal manipulation that had been conducted by the shadow government in order to what? To stabilize beneficial positive timelines. And this explains Nikola Tesla, the triple temporal alliance. This explains the development of the positive military advance programs through Solar Warden, William Tompkins, and of course the Galactic Federation that intervened also. Okay, so this type of intervention is rooted in making sure that humanity awakens and becomes sovereign, okay, which is part of the original timeline. Well, the conflict between these two forces is also fought beyond conventional battlefields. As mentioned, this is a different phase of the spiritual interdimensional warfare, because this type of warfare is waged across moments in time through subtle alterations, pivotal decisions, energetic shifts that ripple across entire different timelines. And so a single event influenced at the right moment can redirect the course of an entire reality. What humanity experiences as global uncertainty, rapid change, and increasing polarization is part of what is known as the surface level effects of this deeper temporal struggle. As multiple timelines begin to converge, inconsistencies and anomalies become more noticeable. And I'm sure a lot of us are seeing that, right? This is what they call glitches in the matrix, Mandela effects, synchronicities. Well, reality itself begins to feel more fluid as the different versions of events are competing to become dominant. And this is the idea that based on our own vibrational frequency, which is of course set by our thoughts and our intentions and our emotions, we are constantly shifting from one version of the earth to an alternative earth reality. This convergence ultimately leads towards a singular inevitability, which is the collapsing of multiple timelines into one primary reality. Now, to clear a confusion here, because I know I mentioned that there are an infinite amount of probabilities or probable future Earth realities, and then there are 6 positive timelines and 6 negative timelines. Well, originally, all of these infinite amount of future probabilities collapse back into the 6th positive and the 6th negative. In other words, all of these other timelines or probabilities, or an infinite amount of probabilities, are fracturized or broken off splinters of these original 12. So ultimately, the infinite amount of timelines collapse into the 12 timelines, 6 positive, 6 negative, as revealed in my previous presentation. And then those 12 timelines collapse into the trifurcation. Okay, so I just wanted to clear that up. So this moment, known as the convergence, which is about to happen in our planet, which is described as a timeline convergence or a trifurcation point, since there will be a middle timeline, determines the direction of what future you end up in, okay, of humanity's future. Whether that future reflects unity, expanded awareness, and technological harmony, or control, or fragmentation and limitation, it all depends on which timeline you ultimately resonate with. Yet beyond all technological and strategic influences, there does remain a factor that cannot be fully controlled or predicted. And that factor, my friends, is human consciousness. All right, so each individual, through perception, through belief, through inner alignment, contributes to the stabilization of a particular timeline. In this sense, the timeline wars are deeply internal instead of them being external when you really think about it. So the collective state of human awareness acts as a gravitational force, drawing reality toward one outcome over the other. It's like tuning into a particular radio station or television station. And this suggests that the ultimate resolution of the timeline temporal war will be decided solely by the evolution of consciousness itself. So as humanity becomes more aware, more coherent, and more aligned with higher principles, which is happening, right? The Great Awakening. The probability of a positive timeline increases when that happens. So, on the other hand, when people are generating fear, division, and disconnecting from the natural way of life, it favors the negative outcome. Okay. So the idea that multiple Earths exist and that they are interacting right now, they are competing, and they have been for quite some time. Again, these time wars could be traceable back to millions of years ago. 10,000 years ago was when the Galactic War began to interconnect with the development of our own breakaway groups in the 40s and 50s, beginning with the Nazis, the spacefaring Nazis, who were the first to colonize the moon and, of course, reach space before the military-industrial complex did. So in a little bit, I will be explaining how that happened. Again, all of these attempts to alter timelines to affect the future has been going on as long as the Galactic Wars have existed. Okay, for those that are familiarized with the galactic and cosmic history, you know that the ability to manipulate time has always existed. All right, so by virtue of this perspective, guys, which is the idea that eventually things are going to be converging. Okay, humanity is participating in the selection reality. And now that is very important to understand, all right? We are participating in the selection reality. So in this regard, you choose your timeline. And that is why I always reinforced the fact that today's the 25th of March, 2026. And yes, we are still on a positive timeline trajectory, right? Because I'm reinforcing that reality, okay? The timeline wars have been happening for, again, as long as time has existed in self. And for those that have taken my cosmic origin class, when I break down the cosmic history, we know that this cosmic war ultimately broke out in a prior universe in the 11th creation, approximately 400 billion years ago. So we could say that the time wars were around for about 400 billion years. I know you have to understand, there is a cosmic history to this that could be traceable before the inception of our own universe. So they are finally coming to an end in our time at the nexus point in favor of the light as we approach this convergence. Okay. And it is important to understand that this convergence is shaping the path forward in every moment in time based on our intentions, thoughts, and emotions, which sets our frequency, right? It determines our vibration. So for those that doubt it, that the Cabal Illuminati did also experiment with time travel, let me take you guys back to some accords that were initiated by the shadow government and, of course, the NAA, the Negative Alien Agenda Syndicate, which are the bad ETs. Well, it first started with reverse engineering. Now, this is part of a corridor of history that was never supposed to make the limelight. But again, there were some defectors like Preston Nichols who exposed the truth about the experiments in time travel. And a lot of this began with, of course, how they were exploring the concept of time dilution as far back as, believe it or not, guys, the early 40s. And again, a lot of this first originated with the Nazis, okay? So in the classified corridors of history, and this is a chapter of history removed from public records, of course, there did exist a narrative that was never spoken about, yet, of course, we heard about it because of the defectors, of the whistleblowers, and the insiders who decided to tell the truth. And so I want to give thanks and appreciation to Phil Snyder, Preston Nichols, and all of those defectors of the shadow government. Of course, William Tompkins, and the guy who wrote "Behold a Paled Horse." I think that was he was Navy. He was an officer in the Navy. I think his name was William Cooper. So big shout out and appreciation to all of those cats: William Cooper, Preston Nichols, Phil Snyder. Okay, so the rise of the modern military industrial complex was the result of rapid scientific progress following the Second World War. Right after the Nazis struck a deal with the Greys, the Zetas from the star system of Zeta Reticula 1, Zeta Reticula 2, and the Draconians behind them from the star system of Alpha Draconis and Regal. Eventually, Winston Churchill was also manipulated through the House of Rothschilds to establish a deal with them. And eventually, of course, Truman was the American president who betrayed the American people, also began to establish an agreement with the negative alien agenda. Okay, so this is what began the covert era, right? One where this certain group within global power structures entered shadow accords with the negative alien agenda group, also known as the Orion Self-Service Syndicate. So these intelligences described in cosmic level clearance, we're talking about the Draconians and the Greys, who gained control of the American government, the Nazis first, and the British, the British government, and then later the American government. They were technologically advanced, but they lacked ethics, and of course, they were very self-serving. Okay, so they understood how to manipulate space-time mechanics because they were already very advanced in external technology. And so this was knowledge that extended far beyond anything known to conventional science. And this is the reason why since the 1940s and 50s, there's been two tiers of or groups of scientists. Tier one is surface level scientists. These are the scientists that are still ruled by Darwinianism, Newtonian mechanics, conventional thinking. And then you have tier two. These are the scientists that were sworn into oath to not reveal the black budget programs and the experiments that they were, of course, conducting in underground networks and underground labs, underground bases. You guys know where I'm heading at, right? Since the 1940s, the community of scientists split into two tiers, okay? So the earliest experiments are traceable back to what became known as the Philadelphia experiment. I don't know if you guys ever heard of the Philadelphia experiment, but according to the whistleblowers, this operation has long been described as an attempt to render a naval vessel invincible using powerful electromagnetic fields. However, the experiment went far beyond invincibility. They were trying to experiment with making a naval vessel invisible. It briefly destabilized and the ship's position within space-time, causing it to face out of conventional reality. They did succeed in their experiment. However, it was also reported that a lot of the crew members that were on that vessel came back to form. Limbs were, rearranged, and of course, nobody talked about that. So there were some casualties. Now, according to these accounts, the event revealed something far more dangerous than anticipated. Time and space could be not only bent, but it could also be physically altered. So while the original experiment was deemed as a failure due to catastrophic side effects, it actually opened up the door to a new field of research in tier group 2, right, the breakaway group, for the shadow government that would be pursuing it in deeper secret. And this is what later, decades later, about 10 years later, this is what evolved. The Philadelphia experiment evolved into what became known as the Montauk Project. Montauk. Well, according to whistleblower Preston Nichols and others, Montauk was about psychological experiments or electromagnetic manipulation. It became a hub for temporal field testing. They began using reverse engineering technologies derived from non-human sources, and it is believed that those crashed craft were actually intentional so that we can begin experimenting. I guess the negative alien agenda syndicate group, the Draco and the Greys, were trying to see if our scientists were clever enough to reverse engineering. And when they saw that they were able to do that, that's when they decided to work with them. They realized that they had reached a certain level of intelligence. Okay. So they weren't too primitive anymore, in other words. So using this reverse engineering technologies that derive from these planned crash craft, researchers attempted to stabilize the portals within the time field. These portals were not simple gateways, but points of access to alternate moments and parallel timelines. And so the experiments focused on viewing probable futures, altering localized events, and sending information or even individuals across time. Okay, so this was done. This was all part of the Montauk project. But the deeper program advanced that eventually gave them the inevitable results that they needed to perfect time travel. Not only being able to take their consciousness and the perception to view different probable futures, but also to begin affecting them physically. Okay, this is where the program advanced, where they were able to manipulate time and space, and it, of course, caused a ripple effect across different Earth realities. So those ripple effects, once they were initiated, they cannot easily be contained unless, of course, there is a countermeasure. Okay, so the program that all of this led to, that allowed the shadow government to perfect altering physical outcomes, was known as Project Pegasus. So what started off with the Philadelphia experiment in the early 40s and led to the Montauk project in the mid-50s, eventually culminating in Project Pegasus, which represented the next phase of this hidden technology. So the objective was to navigate time with precision through Project Pegasus. Now, according to some of the later whistleblowers, participants in this program were exposed to technologies capable of projecting consciousness and even physical presences into different points along the timeline. And so the focus shifted from experimentation to application. The goal was very clear: to gain strategic advantage by influencing key moments in history, which explains the negative Trump that was inserted in 1992, right? When they saw the different probable realities and they saw that the original Trump was tasked with infiltrating the pedo network, they tried to use time travel by, of course, inserting a different version of reality, okay? So in this program, time travel was used for control and, of course, to prevent the positive timeline from existing, which, of course, thanks to the forces of light, they failed. So one of the things that they were able to do, though, through Project Pegasus, they were able to make minor adjustments, subtle interventions here and there, right? And a lot of this ties to CERN and the Mandela effect. Small changes that could actually produce massive long-term outcomes, where they would alter certain conversations, where they would make a certain decision that would alter the future, and even events that were delayed or accelerated, okay? So over time, these adjustments began to form a pattern, one that suggested the existence of an ongoing effect to anchor a specific version of reality that apparently was more aligned with a dark agenda. And again, this is where the development of the shadow government, secret space program, time travel, and all these advanced technologies connects to the Galactic Wars, okay? Because what is more revealing within this framework is the fact that our shadow government was being assisted by a group of negative aliens that I mentioned. The Greys from Zeta Reticula 1 and 2, and the Draconians from the Alpha Draconis, Hydra Draconis, no, I'm sorry, Alpha and Sigma Draconis star system, and Regal, okay? And so it is important to understand that at this time, what ended up happening was during the collapse of Atlantis, when the Watchers, or we call the negative Anunnaki, took over the affairs of our world, the Galactic Federation isolated our planet, and yes, they're the ones that put us under quarantine when the negative Anunnaki took over, because they were bringing peace to the rest of the galaxy. In other words, they were winning the wars of Orion. And so what ended up happening was the Anunnaki, in collaboration with our Draco superiors, time traveled into Nazi Germany during the late 20s to meet, or in early 30s, to begin negotiations with the Thule Society and, of course, the Nazi secret societies. And this is what led to the establishment of the Dark Fleet. Okay, so this is how the Galactic Wars perfectly interconnect with the breakaway groups. Okay, and then that's when, of course, they popped into our reality around 1940 and began to secretly work with the Nazis. So let's continue here. So all right, once a civilization begins to manipulate time, it also becomes very vulnerable to those who have mastered it far longer than, of course, those who had recently perfected it. So the unintended result of these programs was increasing instability in the original divine outcome as it connects to the interdimensional warfare between light and dark. So as the shadow government attempted to influence outcomes, timelines began to diverge, overlapping and interfering with one another. Reality itself became less fixed, more fluid, and more responsive to intervention. And so what was once a single linear progression began to resemble a network of competing probabilities. And within this network, control became increasingly difficult to maintain because time, by its nature, resists domination. So the Cabal's pursuit of power led them to explore with or work with forces that they didn't fully understand, as they were under their mind control. Of course, we're talking about the Draconians and the Greys behind the Cabal, okay? So in the mind of these aliens, the negative aliens, they were just trying to win the Galactic Wars. They were just trying to end the attempt by the Federation to liberate the galaxy on a surface level or planetary level of existence. The Nazis and the Cabal were trying, they were actually under mind control, okay? It's been revealed that even our world leaders, the 13 bloodlines of the Cabal, and all of those members of the secret societies are literally under mind control. And there's a reason for that, okay? They are mind control because these people suffer from a high concentration of draconian genetics, draconian DNA. So they are human reptilian hybrids, all right, these Cabal families. And so by virtue of that, they act as host to the negative aliens. All right, so in the end, guys, the concept of this temporal warfare does go beyond technology. It is about influencing reality. It's about consequences and the limits of control. And perhaps even more importantly, it is about whether reality is something we command or something we are still learning to understand. Now, the second part of the presentation is coming from a classified intelligence report, U.S. Space Force Command. The file code is temporal OPS 1954. Subject: temporal intervention, extraterrestrial protocol breach, and formation of Solar Warden. So this is the part that goes more into detail regarding the meeting between Eisenhower and Commander Valiant Thor. So this report outlines the sequence of events that led to the establishment of the positive secret space program, Solar Warden. Now, most people think that Solar Warden was just instrumental in policing our solar system and, of course, working with the Galactic Federation to help liberate the galaxy. But it was created for a much deeper, you could say, level of doing things, okay? It is actually, Solar Warden is more of a covert multi-domain defense initiative that was created in response to the unauthorized extraterrestrial intervention and emerging temporal destabilization of the positive timeline. So when the negative alien syndicate began to initiate the negative programs, by virtue of that, they breached and broke the Galactic protocol, okay, of non-intervention. And so by virtue of that, the United Federation of Planets, the Association of Worlds, which is our local star interstellar council, decided to intervene, okay? So the primary catalyst of this, due to the intervention of these dark entities, there was a confirmed diplomatic engagement that took place in 1954 between U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower and off-world emissary Valiant Thor, representing the Venusian Council. Now, the mission objective of this meeting in 1954 was to contain the timeline manipulation that was conducted by the Cabal and their negative alien overlords in order to what? To neutralize the hostile non-human influence and preserved the integrity of the primary divine timeline. And this is the reason why we won the war. So, beginning in the late 1940s, intelligence divisions identified some anomalies, technological advancements within black budget sectors of the military-industrial complex. And it is believed that this was done by a person, an aerospace tycoon by the name of Howard Hughes, okay? These advancements exceeded projected human capability curves. Further investigation indicated that these unauthorized contracts between the negative non-human entities, the Greys, and their higher overlords, the draconian reptilians, had, again, broken a galactic protocol. So the transference of advanced propulsion system energy and even the ability to control temporal field concepts, which is to manipulate timelines through time travel, was a no-no. And so the Galactics needed to intervene also from behind the scenes. So these interactions between Commander Valiant Thor and later, of course, the Ashtar Command, who also met with Eisenhower, were determined to be in the violation, or they met because it was determined that there was a violation that was established by the Galactic non-interference protocols, which prohibit external manipulation of developing civilizations. So as a result of that, Earth was designated as an active temporal risk zone. And so the location was Edwards Air Force Base, 1954, February 1954. And the subject matter was Valiant Thor identified as an envoy of a Guardian-aligned interstellar coalition that was representing the Venusian Council. The purpose of this contact with Eisenhower was to address protocol violations that were conducted by the Grey Draconian factions in order to issue formal warnings regarding the temporal destabilization of the Time War. After cooperative framework to restore planetary timeline integrity, key intelligence delivered that Earth exists within multiple overlapping timelines nearing convergence. Also, that unauthorized temporal experimentation would lead to fragmentation or collapse, and a correction of intervention systems that was required to correct the planetary trajectory. So, despite the warnings, these black budget programs continued advancing under compartmentalized authority. And so, key operations that were identified was the Philadelphia experiment, which was being monitored by the Galactic Federation then, before the Galactic Alliance, which was what? An early space-time destabilization attempt. They also identified and were observing the Montauk project, which was an attempt to electromagnetic timeline interface testing. They also were able to observe the Project Pegasus, which was temporal navigation and event observation and physical influence of the timelines. And so the assessment of these programs by the Galactic Federation forced the Galactic Federation to time travel 10,000 years ago into our present moment, knowing the dire effects of what would have happened to the multiverse if they didn't, in order to influence by external technologies that resulted in, once again, localizing timeline fractures, probability field distortions, and increased susceptibility to external timeline manipulation. In other words, the fact that they were able to work with the Y hats and create the positive programs was an indicator that the Earth is the most important planet in the universe. Okay, they had to intervene. So, following the 1954 contact, a countermeasure was initiated that, under joint command with the naval aspect of our military, Solar Warden was developed. All right, and so Solar Warden did receive an operational mandate, and that was to monitor extraterrestrial activity within our solar system. So not only were they designed to patrol our solar system, but also to counter unauthorized off-world interferences and to develop defensive capabilities beyond conventional aerospace. And last but not least, to establish early temporal anomaly detection systems. And so, with continued Guardian collaboration, we're talking about the Galactics, Solar Warden evolved beyond a space-based initiative. And so this is what led to the Positive Secret Space Program. And so new capabilities were included, and that was the detection of timeline divergence points, stabilization of high-risk temporal convergence zones, and prevention of permanent timeline hijacking scenarios, synchronizing with higher order guardians and the prime directive of the One Infinite Creator. So, unlike the shadow aligned programs that were conducted by the shadow government, Solar Warden was given the technology by the Galactic Federation to calibrate and restore and undo all of the negative timelines back into the divine original timeline preservation. Okay, so the Guardian civilizations, we're talking about the Galactics and those that were associated with service to others and that were aligned with Prime Creator Source. They did provide a limited technological framework under strict conditions. Okay, this is what they established under strict conditions. And the reason why they were able to give this technology to Solar Warden, that they cannot use it for domination or for timeline overwrite, that these technologies must maintain harmonic alignment with natural temporal flow, and that intervention only permits or intervention only permitted to prevent irreversible collapse scenarios. And so the primary objective is to ensure the survivability of the original divine timeline across all probable fields. Think about that. The primary objective between Commander Valiant Thor, the Positive Federation, and the naval intelligence was to ensure the survivability of the original divine timeline across every probable fields. Well, this explains the temporal triple alliance. In order to secure the positive timeline across every probable field, the Galactic Federation allowed for one of their members to incarnate in the late 1800s, and you guys know where I'm heading, right? Who later became Nikola Tesla. So what they did is one of the Galactic Federation members incarnated as Nikola Tesla. So now you guys know Nikola Tesla was literally almost like a galactic walk-in, all right, with full recognition of interdimensional physics and advanced technology. But he was a good man. So in the 1920s, before he supposedly died, and I was the first one to reveal this, the Triple Temporal Alliance, in order to correct all the timelines across every probable field, they had to initiate the correction prior to the development of the military-industrial complex in the 1950s, prior to the Montauk project, and of course, prior to Project Pegasus. So what do? Is they traveled back in time, back to the I think, when was Nikola Tesla born? 1860s, right? Something like that. 1870s, not sure. But overall, they traveled back in time prior to the Nazi secret societies, prior to Maria Orsic, prior to the Nazis inheriting the technology, in order to correct every probable field. Okay? And this explains why the Trumps, the real Trumps, are time travelers, right? Because John Trump, MIT professor, was tied in close with Nikola Tesla. And this explains Baron Trump, right? Baron Trump is a time traveler. Okay, let's continue here. So I told you guys I was going to connect a lot of dots today. So all intelligence, according to this report, does indicate that the Earth is approaching a multi-timeline convergence threshold. I've been talking about this for quite some time. And so the observed indicators are increased global instability, rapid technological acceleration, heightened electromagnetic and planetary anomalies, and psychological and perceptual shifts among populations. And the assessment is this: multiple timelines are collapsing into one singular dominant reality field. And of course, we know that the Triple Temporal Alliance, thanks to Nikola Tesla and John Trump, were able to beat the cabal on every probable future reality, thus securing the positive timeline. So, the outcome of convergence remains variable but very bounded, my friends. And some of the key factors that are influencing the final timeline are, of course, collective human consciousness coherence, stability of temporal defense grid, thanks to Solar Warden, the Jupiter Command, and recently, 3i Atlas. And yes, my friends, 3i Atlas is now leaving our solar system. I believe is first heading over to Uranus, to make a final stop. I should do a presentation on that. Anyways, another key factor was the neutralization of external interference vectors. And so the Guardian level oversight remained very active. And so under no circumstances is the primary divine timeline to be permanently compromised. All Solar Warden divisions are authorized to maintain timeline integrity, prevent full spectrum collapse, preserve humanity's capacity to determine its own evolutionary trajectory. And so the timeline wars, even though they have been ongoing since the rebellion in the 11th creation, right? The 11th universe, the battlefield has always been in the manipulation of the temporal, which is what? Being able to collapse timelines, insert realities, and alter outcomes, okay? That is what's known as the temporal time wars. And so While multiple sources have attempted to shape the outcome, as revealed here in this presentation, there is a final authority that does not lie within those who manipulate time, but with those who ensure its rightful alignment. Okay, now I'm going to introduce to you guys who the Time Lords are, which is a functionary collective of prime creator source existing in the central universe, which corresponds to the realms of eternity, the Motherverse. So, you guys are going to love this next part. And this is why the light is always on the winning side. This is why ultimately all of these experiments in polarity, regardless of the time wars, regardless of what happens, they ultimately collapse back into God's plan, okay? So, if the timeline temporal wars represent the struggle over possible futures, then beyond all groups, factions, advanced civilizations, all technologies and civilizations that have ever existed, there is a greater force, one that does not participate in the war, but governs it ultimately from higher levels of reality. Okay? So I don't know if you guys know, but those that operate or exist within higher realities always manipulate the lower realities. Okay? So even though the Galactic Wars have been existing throughout, history, cosmic history, from dimensions 4 all the way to dimensions 9, there is a different layer of reality beyond dimensions 9 that pierces into what is known as the realms of eternity. And we all know that across many esoteric traditions, there did exist an idea that time itself was not an independent structure, but a field generated by what? Consciousness. So within this field, countless timelines emerged. They branched out. Some collapsed, others formed. And what appears to be a multiverse of possibilities, advanced civilizations, whether human or otherwise, may learn to navigate this field, influence probabilities, and even alter key events. This is the level at which temporal conflict is often imagined to occur. But beyond those who navigate time, there are those who originate it, okay? And they'll ultimately have the final say-so. And again, these are these are often described in the greater cosmic community as the Time Lords. And I should do a whole presentation of these different functionaries from the central universe. So who are the Time Lords? Well, the Time Lords, they don't rule in a conventional sense, okay? They are actually expressions of a higher organizing intelligence, an aspect of what many ancient traditions call prime creator source. So rather than existing within time, this collective or branch of prime creator source exists outside of time, perceiving all timelines simultaneously as a unified structure. So from this vantage point, past, present, and future are not separate. They are just layers of a single living architecture. According to this revelation, the Time Lords are not engaged in conflict the way lower dimensional civilizations engage. They don't even compete for dominance over timelines. Instead, the role of the Time Lords is described as the stabilizers and alignment, ensuring that despite the countless variations and distortions that may arise, that reality ultimately resolves or bounces back to the original divine timeline. Okay, so in this sense, the timeline wars conducted by interstellar conflicts or advanced temporal strategies exist within a bounded system of what is known in the higher evolution archives as the experiments in the time, space, and matter levels of reality, which are part of a finite system. Right? Civilizations may attempt to influence outcomes, alter events within the finite system, dimensions 1 to 9. That's where the finite systems exist, dimensions 1 through 9. Or they may redirect the flow of history, but these changes are not infinite in their reach. They occur within a framework that maintains coherence. So the concept of the Time Lords represents that framework, the framework that exists outside of the boundaries of the finite, right? The experiments in the time, space, and matter levels of reality. And so the Time Lords represent the layer that is outside of that exists in eternity. So from a metaphysical perspective, the ability of these Time Lords are described in symbolic terms, okay? And that is the capacity to expand or compress time at will, to accelerate it or slow it down, or, depending on how they want certain events to unfold. They could literally, like the way we press rewind on a cassette tape or a movie that we're watching, or, fast forward, they do the same with realities, okay? So, and they also ultimately recalibrate timelines in order to what? To collapse everything back to the original divine blueprint. And so these descriptions are not necessarily literal mechanisms, but ways of processing the idea that reality is not fixed and that its structure can actually be influenced at levels of awareness beyond the finite systems. So, at the level of advanced civilizations, dimensions 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, influence might take the form of technology, strategy, or intervention, right? As indicated throughout the Galactic Wars. Well, at the level of the Time Lords, which are above that, influence it more on a fundamental level because they operate at a level of what is known as pattern and principle. And so rather than rewriting individual events, they actually shape the conditions under which events unfold. So, thank you for the water.
Welcome.
This introduces an important distinction, my friends. While lower levels of intelligence may attempt to control outcomes directly, higher levels beyond the finite systems operate by guiding the overall direction of reality without overriding the integrity of the system itself. So, in many philosophical traditions, this is described as a balance between free will and universal order. So, the existence of multiple timelines suggests that free will allows for variation, different choices, different paths, different outcomes. But the idea of an underlying original timeline suggests that there is also a form of attractor state, a direction toward which reality naturally tends to move. Within this view, the Time Lords are not imposing a single outcome, but ensuring that across all variations, the system remains aligned with its foundational principle, coherence, continuity, and of course, the preservation of existence itself. Now, applied to Earth, this concept implies that regardless of how chaotic or uncertain events may appear, there is a deeper level at which stability is maintained by the Time Lords. So the idea that advanced civilizations might attempt to influence Earth's timeline, whether through intervention, observation, or temporal technologies, it fits within the broader narrative of competing influences. But even those influences, my friend, exist within a larger structure that is governed by universal laws and realities that operate outside of the finite system. Now, for those of you that are pondering what the finite systems are, those are the projections, the holograms, the simulations. Original base reality exists from dimensions 10 and above. Anything under dimension 10 is considered a simulation. So at the highest levels of this structure, the role attributed to the Time Lords is not one of domination, but of integration, because they represent the principle that all timelines, no matter how divergent they may appear, ultimately reconnect to a coherent whole. And in this sense, the final timeline is a victory achieved through alignment. So the timeline, temporal war, then can be understood as a process of exploration, of possibility, variation, and choice. But beyond that process lies a deeper continuity, one that ensures that reality does not fragment indefinitely. Instead, it converges. And within that convergence, the idea of the Time Lord serves as a reminder that beyond all complexity, beyond all conflict, and all variation, there does exist an underlying unity, a structure that holds the entirety of existence together. So, whether we interpret it as a metaphor, as a philosophical, phenomena, or a cosmological one, this idea points to a central question. If reality ultimately resolves into a coherent whole, which it does, thanks to the Time Lords, those that operate beyond the simulations, then what role does each conscious being, that is all of you, play in shaping the path that leads to whatever desired outcome you want? Okay? So, I needed to share this with you guys because all of this could be explained in one single statement. And that is that God Almighty, the one infinite creator, the one that operates from a reality outside of the finite systems, has the final say-so. And this is the reason why God is always in control. God is always in control, okay? The infinite creator. So, I hope you guys really enjoy this. So now we connected the Galactic Wars, their intention to time travel, right? When the Federation was winning the Galactic War 10,000 years ago, how they connected with the secret societies in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s that later developed the breakaway groups. It was all part of the Galactic Wars. So it's like the Earth was thrown into the Galactic War covertly, without the surface world knowing, until, of course, the whistleblowers started speaking out. And so I dedicate this presentation to brave souls like William Cooper, Preston Nichols, Phil Schneider, and many others. All right. At this point, I will be taking Q&A. You guys like my shirt, The Secret Government, Invisible Architects? It's nice, huh? Thank you. Yeah, I do have clothing that are available through my website, guys. This helps to promote my book. And I do have also Galactic Jedi shirts, Galactic Jedi hats, cups, hoodies, you name it. And our Cosmic Origin ones. All right, time for Q&A. I do want to give some shout outs, though. I want to see who is in the house. 1,000 years ago, fact, yes, 1,000 years ago, that's right. The Galactic Federation was in a position to ending the Orion Wars. So in order to, so when they were in a position in ending the Orion Wars, the Draco realized that in order to regain control and prevent them from ending the Orion Wars and the rest of the Galactic Wars, they needed to travel back into a key moment in time where humanity was already at the level of understanding this interdimensional technology. And of course, that key moment in time was right around the 1920s, beginning with the German secret societies. All right. So, yeah, this is where the Galactic Wars connect with the breakaway development of the SSP programs. William Ryan is in the house. Else Moeller is in the house. Melissa Harper, Elise Starr, Julie B, Sarah Drew, Jose Mendez, Norman is in the house. Project Skyfall. Scott Lewis, Jill Hunt, Sheila Marie is in the house. Melissa Harper, Richard Drafts is in the house. Sunny Lovelight, and one more person that I've never called. Who can that be? LCD001 is in the house. All right, so now I am going to be taking Q&A. Thank you, Susan K, for your donation. Appreciate that, sister. Thank you, Marty, for your super chat. I, the AKA Red Magnetic Skywalker, have enjoyed the challenge of being the love and light of our infinite creator incarnated. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. I like this. This is from Mario Angels. You are all Christ with amnesia. God consciousness, your old self, fake self is a real, no, your old self is a real multidimensional entity and your worst enemy that will fight you with all his power for you to never become the God you. Well, there is an attempt by the dark forces to prevent us from overcoming our amnesia and remembering our God consciousness. I do agree with that. But I like the beginning part where he says, you are all Christ with amnesia. That is so true. That is so true. Facts, as they say. I want to welcome all the new viewers. Thank you guys so much for subscribing. Christopher Brennan says, I am in the house. Welcome, Christopher. Thank you, Lawana. Thank you so much for your super chat. Questions. Okay, somebody wants me to talk about the Melchizedek priesthood spirituality. All benevolent ET beings have this spiritual principle. Yes, that is correct. The Melchizedek priesthood exists across multiple realities, other dimensions. In fact, a lot of the positive races that are aligned with the original timeline, Prime Creator, they're all part of the cosmic sisterhood and brotherhood of the Melchizedek order. So that is correct. I mean, I could do a whole live on that and how that connects with what is known as the Great White Brotherhood on the planet. Thank you, Nathan Taylor, for your super chat. He says, can a fog pick up on a Draco reptile that's in human form? I'm not sure about that, but I believe that for those that are psychics, intuitive empaths, you're able to read the energy, okay? Because they have a particular energy that is very nasty, and for those of you that have psychic abilities, for those of you that could really see people for what they really are, I'm sure that it'll be like that movie They Live, where you put on those glasses and you're able to identify out of the human population who's reptilian or who's Draco and who's not. That is so true. So yeah, divine intervention took place in 1954 when the United Federation of Worlds and the Association of Worlds, which again is pertaining to our local star cluster, decided to intervene because the Dracos, the Greys, and the Zetas, and some of the insectoids, not all, some, violated the Prime Directive. And so, by galactic law, if a negative species intervenes with a developing civilization, then the good guys could do something about it. But they had to do it also in secret because they knew that on the surface level that humanity was not ready until now. Now we're ready. Back in the 1950s and 60s, I don't think humanity was ready to understand, interdimensional physics, dark matter, dark energy, superposition, entanglement, all that stuff that we are now understanding. So everything happens for a reason when you guys really think about it. Homegrown Neating Company says, thank you so much for your super chat. The people that have been replaced by clones, which is pretty much most of the celebrities and politicians, or actors or their spouses aware. I don't think so. I don't think their spouses are aware because these clones act very the same like the original person.
You missed a question.
All right. Patricia. Oh, Patricia. Okay, I'll get to that one. Is that why Kash Patel got a divorce and is now with what seems to be a handler? Well, again, depending on the timeline that you're in, there is a timeline where Bondi and Kash Patel were 2.0. They were replaced by the good guys. And then there's a timeline there where Kash Patel and Pam Bondi were replaced by the bad guys. So again, guys, we live in a multiverse. Let's continue here. All right, Patricia is next. I didn't mean to skip you, Patricia. Let's see, where are you at? Oh, no, I got it. Okay, Patricia, thank you so much for your super chat. Ishmael, could it be that humanity as a whole are not demonstrating enough outrage over COVID and Epstein victims? Is this holding up the EBS? I never thought about that, Patricia, but maybe the reason why all of that stuff is being held back is because, as mentioned, consciousness produces reality. So once we hit critical mass, which is the Maharishi 100 monkey effect, and there is a critical event in consciousness, I think that's when humanity will be ready. And from what I understand is that we're really close to hitting that. And I believe that we might even hit that critical mass where, again, all of this stuff will be disclosed sometime before this year ends. It seems like it's heading into that direction. But you could be right. You could be right because the power of the collective consciousness kind of deters, right? And it drives the trajectory of the different timelines.
I think that it's been held back because of Zionist infiltration.
Well, yeah, in the negative timeline, there is the Zionist infiltration. Correct. All right. Thank you for all you do, Ishmael. Love and light. Gratitude, says LCD. You're welcome, Elsie. You're welcome. Zuzika, thank you so much for your super chat. Well, Ishmael, I am not too impressed with God or the Time Lords. They let timelines run that tortured newborn babies and the little baby children who died in the middle of being so harshly used and abused. Well, there was a protocol that was interjected by the Galactic Alliance, the Galactic Federation, back in the 60s to rescue as many people, children, women that were taken off world in the 1950s during the brain drain project, where the humans on Earth were taken off world to be enslaved, to be sold to the Dracos, to use as food supply, to be tortured. And so in the 60s, once the humans that were taken off world began multiplying, the Galactics began to intervene. And I think it was Commander Athena. In fact, it was Commander Athena, a member of the Ashtart Command, that was the commander that was in charge of the recuperation and rehabilitation programs when they, again, were able to recuperate and save a lot of these humans that were taken off world. So, justice has also been here. It could have been worse, but we are really close to the convergence where even within the spectrum of the 12 timelines, everything collapses into only 3. So Yeah, just make sure you guys are vibrating with the positive, optimal, organic timeline. Nathan Taylor, thank you so much for your super chat. He says, if you leave 4D and say it's 2 p.m., oh, these are those detailed questions, technical questions. If you leave 4D and say it's 2 p.m., will it still be 2 p.m. in the 5D? No, there is no time in the 5D. I know you said that time doesn't exist. Well, it only exists in the 3D. Beyond the 4D, we go beyond time. And how, and on my last question about the Draco reptilians, I meant to say, could a dog pick up on them in human form? Oh, yeah, animals, pets, normally they have a sense for that. They sure do. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Celeste. Celeste, for your super chat. I appreciate that, sister. Liz says, is my super chat visible to you? Well, let's check, Liz. Let's see where it is. I try to do my best to make sure I don't miss those chats, but I'm looking for it right now. No, I don't see it, Liz. I don't see it on my end. I apologize for that. But if you ask the question, Liz, ask the question again. And if it comes up in the chat, I will answer it. Do you know about the moon being originally a Pleiadian starship that used to seed many planets, including Earth? Is the moon connected to the Mu people? Well, you must be referring to the original organic moon, not the fake, hollowed out ET, artificially construct designed to spy on us. No, the current moon is not that one. The original moon was. The original moon was used by the positive, including the Pleiadians, to seed many planets, including the Earth. That is correct, okay? Because the moon broke off from a bigger Earth, a prior Earth that existed before our current Earth did, that was known as Tiamat Earth. So, just to clear the confusion here, the asteroid belt that we see today in our solar system was part of an exploded planet known as Tiamat Earth. And so part of that Tiamat Earth became the asteroid belt, and the other part eventually evolved into our current Earth, which is a lot smaller. All right. So Tiamat Earth was also in between Mars and Venus, or Mars and Jupiter, I'm sorry. But then it was kind of thrown off from orbit. But we're still the third planet from the sun, as Tiamat Earth was prior to its destruction. Now, if you guys want to know the history of Tiamat Earth and how that connects to the Maldekian Mars Wars that took place 4 million years ago, then I would suggest to take my course, Our Cosmic Origin. And yes, a new set of courses are up for grab. For those that are interested, go to my website, ourcosmicorigin.com, and secure your spot. And again, guys, my classes are cheap, $100 a class. You get the most highest level knowledge on the planet, I would assume. All right, I do want to thank Ricky for your super chat. He says, do you know about the war in disguise over Europe in the year of 1600, I believe? I believe the city was in Stockholm. The hotel saw the fighting. They have paintings of Star Wars like battleships in disguise. Yes, I am familiar with that episode that took place in the 1600s. And this was done by our shadow government when they were able to develop time travel technology. So that explains the battle that took place between, the different craft. So somebody's asking, where am I getting my reports? Yes, these are presentations that I actually have to write down because due to my connection with Commander Valiant Thor, I'm able to access everything that's been, documented by the Earth Alliance and the Galactic Alliance. In the event, of course, that the Cabal tries to reset us and you know, mind wipe us again, which didn't happen, of course. So I'm able to access those archives and those records. And so when I get these transmissions from Commander Valiant Thor, I actually have to write them down so that I could cover every detail. Yes, Tiamat Earth was a super Earth. That is correct, says CG. Thank you so much, Rose, for the super chat. She says, I'm getting feedbacks while awake in one of my past. I saw I died. Should I be concerned? No, you shouldn't be concerned. Will those in the negative timeline sleep for 3 days or what? Says Ron. I'm just taking random questions. I don't think so. I think those in the negative timeline are going to be recycled through the World Sentience Simulator, which is creating a digital version of the Earth, a cybernetic Earth, also known as the Phantom Matrix. And so those that are going to be aligning or integrating with technology through, augmentation, um, through technological enhancements, by not eliminating the graphene oxide, by continuing breathing the nanotech, right? Those people are going to be recycled into the technocratic dystopia immediately. So the only people that are going to sleep for 3 days, I think, are those that are ascending into the positive organic timeline, because our bodies need to adjust to the new avatar, which is, again, 12 3D souls or fractions of your souls collapsing back into the avatar in the 5-dimensional Earth. Or for those that go beyond the avatar, you're going to be collapsing not only the 12 personalities on the Earth, which are all you, by the way, but you're also going to be collapsing the 12 avatars into the monad if you go over to the, seventh dimension, eighth dimension. All right, let's continue here. Thank you so much, Stuart Williams, for your super chat. I appreciate that. Lionheart, thank you so much for your super chat. Thank you for your excellent work. You are welcome, brother. Can you tell us about Darcy Crandall and Mary Beaver? Best regards from Norway. I'm sorry, I've never heard of Darcy Crandall and Mary Beaver. I guess I'm going to have to investigate them and see who they are. How do we know if we are going to New Earth? It's very simple. Very simple, guys. What vibration are you resonating to? Right? What frequency are you pitched? Are you generating? So your frequency will determine when the convergence takes place, in which final reality you end up in. So I'm sure everybody here is going to be in the positive ascending timeline. Thank you so much, Nathan Taylor, for your super chat. His question: can a medbed activate all 12 strands of your DNA? I've heard, I was able to access some of these cosmic level clearing records within the advanced contact of intelligent organizations. I did hear that they had some types of technologies that were capable of activating genetics. And I believe that they were able to implement those technologies within the positive programs because of the fact that the enhanced super soldiers within Solar Warden were actually enhanced by just activating their dormant strands. So some of these super soldiers were capable of doing superhuman feats just by virtue of using 6 strands of DNA, 8 strands of DNA, 10 strands of DNA. In some cases, we're using up to 12 strands of DNA. And so that's why they had these superhuman abilities. Now, these superhuman abilities are going to be naturally available to us as a result of the convergence and the integration of multi-dimensions. All right, let's continue here. Yes, they are called crystalline chambers. That is correct. Thank you for pointing that out, Carol Crawford. Yes, Solar Warden has Type 2 technologies. Yeah, they have access to the whole galaxy. So when they travel, it's very similar to Star Trek and Star Wars, right? They go into hyperspace and all of a sudden they go at light speed, or they could just go, they could travel through the Stargate network where they go from one planet or one system to the next by virtue of just plugging in the Stargate stellar code to each system or planet. Will we get the truth about Tartaria and what they were wiped out? Also, were the Tartarians part of the original race of Inner Earth? To answer the first part of your question, Putin from Russia has already starting disclosing the truth about Tartaria. So yeah, eventually it's going to be global. Now, as far as Tartaria being part of the original race of the Inner Earth, that could be possible because among the Tartarian population were the giants, the good giants, which helped in the build out of the Tartarian infrastructures, which were, of course, very advanced. And so I hope that, I know, let me rephrase that. I know, guys, that within the positive timeline trajectory, everything will be coming to the limelight. Okay. So I do know that to be a fact.
Is there some kind of short meditation you want to read? Because there's beneficial things I could say for that.
Ishmael, what do you think of Melania walking with a robot today? If you are referring to the inorganic negative Trump, the original Melania Trump, who is an extraterrestrial human hybrid, is with the original Trump, the real Trump. The fake Trump, the 5'8" shorter, chubby Trump, also has a robot, Melania, okay, an inorganic one. All right, so we're going to end this with a quick prayer and meditation, just so that we could continue affecting the positive timeline trajectory. That is right. God is always in control. That is fact, as revealed today when I talked about the Time Lords and how they operate beyond the simulations, beyond the finite systems. All right, guys, I want you guys to just take a few deep breaths so that you guys could center in and relax. And I will invite Jesus the Christ, firstborn in heaven. There's Jesus the Christ. For those who can't see just Jesus, there you go. Let's move Archangel Michael. There you go. Now you guys can see Jesus the Christ. I want to welcome Archangel Michael, Metatron. I'm sorry, Archangel Michael again, and Metatron. Okay, so now that we are relaxed, I do want to use the power of the Galactic Jedi at this time to fully integrate and anchor in the positive, organic, optimal timeline for as many people as possible. We want to make sure that no soul is left behind, that no soul is recycled into the negative technocratic dystopia through the world sentient simulator, and that the only single reality that remains is the original divine blueprint, the positive timeline. We also want to comfort and send loving energy and healing power to the people of Iran that are suffering, the innocent people, to all the soldiers, the casualties are involved in this war to end all wars. And of course, the people of Hawaii who were affected by the flood last week. I hope you guys have been compensated. And we also ask the Galactic Alliance, we petition the commanders and the Guardian Alliance to just show up, to just make an appearance on a massive scale all throughout the earth to end the cover up so that we could be part of a greater galactic community. May each and every single one of you guys continue anchoring in the positive timeline, even after this live. Just continue holding space. And more importantly, continue participating in the solidification of the positive timeline trajectory. May the God Force be with you all, and we'll see you guys Saturday night for a Galactic Alliance update. Bye, guys.